Hi, welcome to another IELTS video. In this video, we are going to run through an entire IELTS listening test. If you find this lesson helpful, please join us at the forum IELTSnetwork.com. And for more videos like this one, visit my blog at IELTSlisteningblog.com. Before you watch this video, you may be interested in downloading this test and trying it yourself under exam-like conditions. To do this, click the link in the description of this video. After you complete the test on your own time, come back to the video and compare your testing strategy with the one I am going to present here. Otherwise, get yourself a piece of paper and a pen and answer the questions as we proceed through the video. Before we get to the test itself, I want to go over briefly a few strategies that I hope you can put into use during this exercise. The first thing I would like to say about the listening test is that to prepare properly, you will need to engage as many practice tests as you can. The successful IELTS candidates I've talked to in interviews at IELTScast.com all say the same thing, that practicing as many tests as they can is the key to getting a good score on the exam. So practice, practice, practice. Now, a couple of specific strategies to follow while you listen. The recording will give you some time to read the questions before you begin, so it's essential that you read the directions carefully. And as you know, sometimes you will be instructed to write only one-word answers, sometimes you will be allowed to write three-word answers, sometimes you are choosing answers from a list. So it's very important that you read and understand exactly what it is you're supposed to do. Number two, know what sort of information you are going to be listening to. So again, as you know, Section 1 of the exam is an everyday English dialogue, Section 2 is an everyday English monologue, Section 3 is an academic dialogue or a training dialogue, and Section 4 is an academic monologue or a training monologue. So when you're looking at the questions as you prepare for the listening, note what type of data you are going to be listening to. Is it a tour? Is it students talking together? Is it someone paying for a gym membership? And try to prepare yourself mentally for the kind of vocabulary that you're going to encounter. Number three, underline keywords in the text. This is very important. Number four, predict what sort of information or word types could be the answer. So sometimes if you're asked to fill in a blank and you see an article before that blank, like the, you know that this is going to be a noun. Or sometimes you see, if it's, for example, a blank and you can tell from the blank that it's going to be a number, you should mentally note that at that section you will be listening for a number. Okay, number five, if possible, use the review time at the end of each listening section to preview the next section's questions. And this is a strategy that stronger students will use. Okay, let's get started. So now I'll explain what is going to happen. I'm going to use the pauses in the recording to explain what you should be doing as we progress through the exam. I will not answer any of the questions until the next pause in the recording occurs, and at that time I will stop the recording and explain to you what the answers are so that you can check your progress as we move along.
IELTSlisteningblog.com. Mock IELTS Listening Test 1. This recording is copyright EnglishRyan.com.
Okay, so as you know, the listening exam will have a little bit of preamble in the recording, and we can use this time to start previewing our questions because, as we've done so many practice exams before, we only need to half listen to what the recording is saying. So in this first section, we're asked to complete the form. We're asked for no more than 3 words and/or a number, and it looks as though we're listening to something about booking details for a trip. Now, pay attention to the answers that are filled already. And pay attention to some of the key vocab we're going to need to know.
Now turn to Section 1. Section 1. You will hear a conversation between a travel agent and a customer. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 3.
Okay, so now we want to underline key information like the departure airport, the number of hotel nights we're going to be there, the arrival city, and we want to listen to the example for who is who in this dialogue. Is it maybe a woman or a man or 2 men or...
You will see that there is an example that has been done for you. On this occasion only, the conversation relating to this will be played first.
Hello, Palm Travel.
Hello, I'm calling to inquire about one of your package deals.
Okay, and which deal would that be?
Well, your pamphlet says you're offering an all-inclusive trip to Jamaica for just shy of £1,700.
Right.
Could you clarify for me exactly what you mean by all-inclusive?
The customer says he would like to visit Jamaica, so this has been written next to destination country. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 3.
Hello, Palm Travel.
Hello, I'm calling to inquire about one of your package deals.
Okay, and which deal would that be?
Well, your pamphlet says you're offering an all-inclusive trip to Jamaica for just shy of £1,700.
Right.
Could you clarify for me exactly what you mean by all-inclusive?
Right. Well, the package includes return airfare from London Heathrow Airport to Norman Manley International Airport.
Norman Manley International Airport. Is that in Montego Bay?
No, that's right in the capital, Kingston.
I see.
You'll arrive 11 a.m. local time and spend 5 nights at the Oceans Hotel in Kingston. All of this is included in the package fee, of course.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at...
I'm just going to pause. Okay, so now let's just talk very quickly about the answers. You probably picked up, they share all of this information in the recording. So the departure airport is very closely linked to the departure city. It is Heathrow International. The arrival city, they try to throw us in the recording a little bit by, the man says, is the arrival airport Norman Manley, is that in Montego Bay? And she says, no, that's in the capital, Kingston. And then they talk about travel times, the total hotel nights. Now we knew when we were reading the questions ahead of time this was going to be a number, and the correct number is 5. Okay, now the recording is going to give us some time to preview the next set of questions. So let's go ahead and do that.
Questions 4 to 10.
Okay, so we're previewing the questions. We're looking for facilities in the hotel. There's a 5-star restaurant. Access to the, we know this is going to be a noun. Breakfast, this could be a number. This could be the kind of restaurant. A separate booking, let's see, bus tours to other cities. Listen for what this is. It could be a kind of bus or it could be a hotel. Devon House Mansion, years old. This will likely be a number. Kingston day trips. Cayman Park, we can see certain kinds of races. So let's listen to what kind of race that is. Jamaican visa processing usually requires more than a week, can be obtained via a. So what can be obtained? The
now
visa
listen and answer questions 4 to 10.
Okay, and date, that's easy enough.
Lunch and dinner will be provided. Oceans Hotel has a beautiful pool with a swim-up bar, several 5-star restaurants, beach access, Wi-Fi, a gym with both a sauna and a steam room, and optional day trips to several Jamaican landmarks.
And all of this is included in the package price?
No, let me clarify. When I said you will be provided lunch and dinner as part of your package deal, that does not apply to all restaurants within the hotel, only the hotel's tropical grill.
So that means, if I go to the other restaurants, would I have to pay?
Yes, anything except tropical grill. Also, please note that you would need to fend for yourself at breakfast time.
What do most travellers do for breakfast?
The Oceans Hotel is only a short walking distance from an international food court. I suspect most travellers do breakfast there.
I see.
Our package provides travellers with optional day trips to landmarks within Kingston.
I was hoping to visit Montego Bay during my stay.
Bus tours to neighbouring cities are available, but these wouldn't be included in the package fee. And regarding Montego Bay, I believe you would not be able to visit and return to Kingston within a single day.
Really? Why is that?
Well, the bus ride itself is maybe 5 hours or so, give or take.
I see. So visiting Montego Bay would require...
An extra hotel booking, which the holiday package deal would not cover.
Okay, scratch that. So the day trips into Kingston, what can I expect?
The day trips are to locations like the Devon House Mansion, which is a beautiful historical landmark dating back over 100 years. The Botanical Gardens, Caymanas Horse Racing Park and Port Antonio are other areas you will be able to visit. Kingston is brimming with historically interesting locations.
Sounds wonderful.
So, should I book this package for you?
Sure, let's go for it.
Okay, and will you be travelling alone?
Yes, it would just be me.
And when would you like to leave?
Next week, if possible. If I could depart, say, August 20th or 21st, that would be ideal.
The only issue is that you will need to obtain a Jamaican visa prior to leaving. I'm not sure you'd be able to do that within only a week's time. Is your travel time flexible?
Unfortunately not. I only have a week away from my responsibilities with work.
Well, we may be able to help. If you can come in today and leave your passport with me, I can get you to fill out the necessary forms and have my assistant run everything over to the Jamaican embassy. They do have a rush service for visa issuing, but it is a little more expensive than the normal process.
Okay, that sounds all right.
I'm going to go ahead and book you on an August 20th flight to ensure your spot is reserved.
Great.
When can you come by my office?
I can be there within the hour.
Okay, and how will you be settling with us?
I'll put it on my credit card. Perhaps we can arrange all this when I see you.
That sounds fine. See you shortly.
Bye.
Okay, so we've finished that listening. Now, one thing that I forgot to point out is that we should have noted that all of these answers are only one word or one number. So the listening was very straightforward. We heard the facilities in the hotel. She went one by one through all of them. And you probably caught that she stated there is beach access. So the answer to this would be access to the. And of course, we predicted correctly, it is a noun. So this should be beach. Okay, and then she talks about day trips to Jamaica. Breakfast. Now, she mentioned something about a restaurant called the Tropical Grill. And she said that the Tropical Grill will cover lunch and dinner. So you don't have to pay if you go for lunch and dinner. But breakfast, she uses the term fend for yourself, which in English just means you have to take care of yourself. Nobody's going to give you something or help you at this time. So the correct answer here for breakfast would have been 0. 0 restaurants are covered by the trip fee. Lunch and dinner, okay, 1 restaurant, which was the Tropical Grill. Bus tours to other cities, they are not included in the package, as she said. They may require a separate booking, and we thought correctly that this probably would have been a noun. It was a separate hotel booking. Sorry, this isn't lined up very well. Anyway, you know, it should be in there. The man expresses interest in seeing things within the city of Kingston. The woman says Devon House Mansion, a landmark that is over years old, and this is a number as we correctly predicted. It was over 100 years old. She mentions Botanical Gardens, Caymanas Park. She said that there are horse races at Caymanas Park. So you probably may have gotten that one. And Port Antonio. Now the Jamaican visa processing bit, there's a bit of an issue because the man he's got to go to work, or he has commitments with work, I believe he said, and she says that that's fine, that they will be able to get his visa quick via rush service. The only issue is that he would have to pay a little bit more. And finally, I'm sure most of you caught that the departure date was August 20th. There was a bit of confusion. I think the man says, he mentions 21st or 20th, and then they finally decide on the 20th. Okay, good. Let's continue the listening.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Okay, so we have half a minute to check our answers. We feel confident about our answers, so let's go to the next section. Now here we're given a map, no more than 3 words. We see there's a ground floor and there's a mezzanine. The questions 11 to 14 will come in order. So the tour starts here. We're facing the main reception desk. To our right is a restaurant sizzling something. That's probably a name. There's a pine tree. Let's see. There are 2 things here. They both point to this blank. We have to listen carefully. A LED screen, LED screen, and escalators. And then to the right, some big...
Now turn to section 2.
Let's hear.
Section 2. You will hear a hotel manager giving a tour to new employees. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 20.
Okay. There's a spa, there's a gym, and then there's something behind the gym. Now let's go up to the mezzanine. As you know, a mezzanine is the floor that, it's not for rooms, it's the floor above the ground floor. Okay, so up the stairs, we see a portrait, we see 3 empty, what are probably rooms, because these 3 are also rooms. Bathroom, something here, a portrait of Mr. Walton. We'll have to listen to see who Mr. Walton is.
Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 20.
Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, I'm just going to pause. That's the power that I have here. I forgot to show you that there are actually a couple of other questions here. What 2 things are the people given at the end of the tour? Okay, gym passes, name tags, staff lift key cards, time cards.
Right then, if everyone's ready, let's get started. At the moment, we're facing the main reception desk where most of you will be working. To our right, you can see the Sasha restaurant, and further down the hall, you'll see the sizzling grill. Now, we try to encourage guests to eat in-house whenever possible. And after this tour, we'll let you all try a small dish at both restaurants so that you'll feel more confident referring guests there. Let's turn left and walk down the hall. And the first thing you'll see is the Walton Inn pine tree. Now, this tree was planted by Mr. Walton on the day he opened this hotel, which makes this tree more than 50 years old. On our right, you'll see the main guest lifts. Between the lifts is an LED screen where we welcome special visitors to the hotel and display the day's weather. Now, some of you may have heard that Sting stayed with us last year during the final leg of his UK tour. As a welcoming gesture upon his arrival, we played his music in the main hall and displayed photos of his more memorable shows on this screen. Okay, let's continue down the hall. Next to the guest lifts are escalators that will take you to the mezzanine. And up there you'll find Mr. Walton's study and several meeting rooms. But before we head up there, let's walk further along the hall. Because here, we see these large doors on our right leading to the main dining hall. Walton Inn hosts an average of 35 weddings during the summer months. So, I imagine that many of you will be spending rather a lot of time behind these doors. Next to the dining hall, you'll find the spa. Now, the gym and pool area can be accessed by walking through the spa, but please note that we do not permit children into the gym area under any circumstances unless they're going to the pool with an adult. Okay, let's backtrack to the escalators and we'll go up to the mezzanine. Our clientele is predominantly business travellers, unless we have no fewer than 5 bookable meeting rooms. Keeping with our nature theme, we've given these rooms earthy names. From the left, they're flora, bark, petal, moss and twig. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm mistaken. Mr. Walton's study is the 3rd door from the left. But yes, the meeting rooms around the study are flora, bark, petal, moss and twig. And as Mr. Walton is no longer with us, we now make his study available to guests as a personal workplace. Right, opposite these 6 rooms, you'll find a staff lift. And at the end of today's tour, you'll be given key cards that will allow you access to this lift. And to the left of this lift is a portrait of Mr. Walton himself. Well, that about finishes the tour. If there are no questions, let's go downstairs and head to Sasha's for a few samplers.
Okay. Now, let's go over some of the answers. There were a few points in this listening where they tried to misdirect you a little bit. I hope you didn't fall victim to that. So the tour starts. We are listening for number 11. They say this man says, we're facing the main reception desk. To our right is Sasha's restaurant. And next to that is the Sizzling, and it is a name, as we predicted correctly, the Sizzling Grill. And that would be with a capital G. Okay, and we turn left, we were walking down the hall. He says between that was the key to getting this answer. Between the guest lifts is an LED screen. And then he talks about Sting and Sting having a concert there. Then they proceed to walk down the hall, and to the right are escalators, and then he talks briefly about going up the escalators to see Mr. Walton's study, but that's a misdirection. They continue down the hall. He says, but first let's continue down the hall. Okay, so I hope you didn't start going up to the mezzanine and looking at where to put in answers. Continuing down the hall, so they talk about the large double doors, and this was the main dining hall. The main dining hall, and he says this is where many of you will be working. In the main dining hall, they talk a bit about the number of weddings that they serve every year. Then they talk about the spa and the gym, and how behind the gym is the pool. Children are allowed to go to the pool. They are not allowed to go to the gym, but that information really doesn't concern us at all. It was just shared to misdirect us. Okay, then he says, let's backtrack. We'll go up the escalators. So they go up to the mezzanine. On the mezzanine, they talk about these 3 rooms, and he says that all of the rooms have an earthy name. So we have petal, moss, twig. So he first lists the rooms, but he makes a mistake. He says Mr. Walton's study is the 3rd door from the left. So the 3rd door from the left is Mr. Walton's study. He mentions Mr. Walton's study twice. Once while they're walking along the ground floor and once while they're up here. The first room is the Flora meeting room. And the second is the Bark meeting room. Okay, and then they talk a bit about the portrait of Mr. Walton. I do not believe they mentioned the portrait of an English landscape, nor do they mention the bathrooms, nor do they mention the hotel storage room. So a bit too much information in this diagram. Here we have the staff lift. And he says that everyone will get a key card for the staff lift. And then he says going down to try some samples at Sasha's restaurant. So the correct answers here would be staffed lift key cards, letter C, and F, restaurant food samples. This is where they're not getting menus, they're getting samples. Okay, so C and F were the correct answers. Okay, let's proceed to the next section.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead to section 3 instead of reviewing our answers. We're choosing 3 letters, A to G. Which 3 question types do the professors decide to include in the exam? We know this is a dialogue, academic in nature. Okay, true, false, not given, written essay, fill in the blanks, multiple choice questions. Okay, likely this is going to be matching vocabulary to what we hear. Let's see, questions 24 to 26. Choose 3 answers from the box and write the correct letter, A to F, next to questions 24 to 26. Which grade...
Now turn to section 3. Section 3. You will hear 2 history professors discuss the structure of an upcoming exam they will give their students. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 30.
Okay. Which grade weighting applies to each section of the examination? This is definitely going to be numbers. Let's just listen closely to those numbers. Here, write one-word answer or number for each answer. The professors decide to include essay questions. That's going to be a number. The professors decide to make each essay question so many words in length. That's probably a number 2. The professors assume that the students will spend how many minutes, likely a number. Professor Kate is going to draw up section. Okay, we know the answer is going to be 1, 2, or 3 because we can see here there are 3 sections to the exam.
Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 30.
Franklin, would now be a good time to talk about next month's final exam?
Hi, Katie. Yes, sure. Please come in.
I thought we could brainstorm exam structures a little bit. I feel we should include at least one analytical writing assignment to challenge our students' ability to think critically about what they studied.
Great. Yes, an essay question would give them an opportunity to demonstrate what they know too. But could we make this the last section on the exam? Perhaps we could start with a question type that would test the students' knowledge of raw facts. The First and Second World Wars are topics particularly heavy on dates, numbers, names and places.
Yes, good point. But I want to avoid the true, false, not given question type thing this time around. It made up a significant portion of our midterm 4 months ago. It might be worth trying something different this time.
Yes, that's true. But it is such an effective way of pinpointing which students have been completing their take-home readings and which have not.
Would multiple choice questions be equally effective?
Yes, I suppose they would. And like the true, false, not given question types, they would be fairly easy to grade.
OK, so should we say that the multiple choice questions will make up 20 of the total 100 marks on the exam?
That sounds all right. Could you be responsible for pulling those questions together?
Yeah, sure. Now, when you and I last talked, you iterated a desire to test the students' ability to organise large blocks of information. What about making section 2 of the exam a question where the students must create a chronologically accurate paragraph out of disorganised sentences?
Oh, terrific. Hey, what about doing 2 separate paragraphs explaining precursors to each war?
Those would be some pretty broad paragraphs, but I suppose it could be done. We could have the students write numbers next to each sentence indicating its position in a chronologically accurate paragraph.
That sounds all right. OK, leave those 2 paragraphs to me. I'll draw them up this afternoon. Should we award 10 marks to each?
How about 15 each? The final essay question could make up the remainder of the examination's mark.
OK, now about that final section of the exam. I was thinking that perhaps we could have students complete 2 short essays instead of 1 long essay. So 1 for World War I and 1 for World War II.
What essay questions were you thinking?
Well, the first essay question could be something about wartime strategy, like, why do you feel trench warfare dominated so much of the First World War? Or, how did trench warfare affect the duration of the war?
OK, and the second?
Well, I was thinking we could tie critical thinking into this question. What about something like, choose a strategic error made by the Axis powers during World War II and explain how this helped the Allies?
Oh, that will be challenging.
Yes, we'll have to tell the students to study hard.
How about a word count? 500 for the 2 essays?
Now, that sounds about right.
OK, so let me recap what I've noted here. Section 1, multiple choice questions. Section 2, sentence ordering. And Section 3, 2 essays at 250 words each. Altogether, the exam makes up 100 marks. The students will have 2 hours for the exam, which should be ample time.
Oh, I would imagine so. I just hope that the 2 essay questions aren't too much.
It should be all right. I don't think Section 1 and 2 will take well-prepared students more than about 30 minutes.
All right, let's go with it. So you're handling Section 1, I'll handle Sections 2 and 3.
Great. Should we meet this time tomorrow to compile what we have?
Yes, that sounds fine. Thanks, Kate.
OK, Franklin. Until tomorrow, then.
Okay, we'll stop it there. Now, very challenging listening, that one. There, at 2 different points in the listening, Professor Kate goes over she states exactly what they're going to include. So the 3 question types that will be included, the very first one they mention is the essay. So there's going to be an essay question type, so B. And you heard later that there are actually going to be 2 separate essays. They talk about true, false, not given, but Professor Kate says that she wants to avoid that because I believe that they had included that in a previous exam. So they decide to go with multiple choice questions, which is D. And then finally, they talk about ordering sentences into a paragraph. Now, the written paragraph kind of throws you off a little bit, but towards the end of the listening, Kate says very clearly that this question type is sentence ordering. And she describes it earlier, but not with those words. So the correct answer there is F. Now, how are the different sections going to be weighted? Section 1, which is the they decided that section 1 was going to be the multiple choice questions. There were going to be 20 questions, they say, at 1 mark each. So section 1 would be 20%, letter C. Section 2, there were going to be 2 paragraphs. Each of those paragraphs weighted 15 each. So section 2 in total would be 30%. Kind of threw you off there. Some people probably put B. And section 3 was going to make up the remainder. They don't say explicitly 50%, but if we add 20% and 30%, then the remainder would be 50%. F. Write 1 word or a number for each answer. So the professors decide to include how many essay questions on the exam. The answer here is 2. The professors decide to make each essay how many words in length. Again, they try to throw us because they say the total word count is 500. So if there are 2 essays, then these essays would be 250 words each. The professors assume the students will spend how many minutes on section 3? So they mentioned that students that study hard will spend 30 minutes on sections 1 and on section 2. So they imagine the students will allot an hour and a half to section 3. So the number of minutes would be 90. Professor Kate is going to draw up section of the exam, and she's going to do section 1, and the other professor is going to do sections 2 and 3. Okay, let's go back to our listening here and move on to section 4.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Okay, so we're going to use this time to preview. Choose the correct letter A, B, C, or D. Now we want to underline key vocabulary. According to this lecture, people awfully mistakenly think the boomerang. Mistakenly, key, underline this. Okay, we have a few answers here. The lecturer compares the boomerang to airplane wings. Compares and both airplane wings and boomerang. Let's underline those. Returning boomerangs fly on an axis that is perpendicular to. Underline perpendicular. This is a very specific piece of vocabulary, so we'll probably hear this in the list.
Now turn to section 4. Section 4. You will hear a lecturer talk about the origins of the boomerang. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 35.
So to 35. 34. Non-returning boomerangs are thought to have been... Okay, let's underline these words, returning and non-returning, because it looks like we have 2 different kinds of boomerangs. And, okay, now let's go to 35. The lecturer makes it clear that returning boomerangs, underline returning boomerangs, operate the same, we're less functional. Indigenous to be native from an area, slightly smaller than non-returning boomerangs.
Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 35.
From the outset of civilization, humans have used their ingenuity to simplify their lives through the development of tools. It's remarkable how many identical tools were developed independently in completely different parts of the world. The spear, or the bow and arrow, for example, the axe, the knife, the bucket, rope. All of these are tools that can be found on any continent where early human populations existed, despite the fact that these early populations never encountered each other. But did you know that the boomerang is one such tool? Perhaps you thought the boomerang was and always had been from Australia. Well, you may be surprised to know that the boomerang was developed independently in several parts of the world. Before I explain, let's first define what a boomerang actually is. In its most traditional form, a boomerang is a 1 to 2 foot long tool that's often made of wood. It has a bend in the middle, which makes the boomerang look a little like a pair of aeroplane wings. In fact, aeroplane wings are a good analogy to make when describing a boomerang. If you were to look closely at a boomerang, you would see that the bottoms of the wings are flat, while the tops of the wings are rounded. This is again very similar to the wings of an aeroplane. This design is what gives the boomerang lift and allows it to stay aloft longer than a simple throwing stick such as a spear. It's also the reason why the boomerang returns to the thrower. When a boomerang is thrown, it flies on an axis perpendicular to where it's been thrown from. What this means is that if the boomerang is thrown correctly, it should return to its thrower. Boomerangs capable of doing this are known as returning boomerangs. Non-returning boomerangs, as you can probably guess, do not come back to their throwers because they lack a rounded side. Both sides of this type of boomerang are flat. With its simpler design, anthropologists believe that this boomerang had been developed well before the returning boomerang. Although commonly believed that the returning boomerang was used for hunting, this has been proven untrue. It's more likely that the returning boomerang has always been used for fun or sport. It's the non-returning boomerang that was used for hunting purposes. I'll touch on hunting uses in a second. First, let's talk about history.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation...
Okay, we'll get to that in a second. Okay, so the questions, now there's a lot of text to kind of work through as you're listening, but they're pretty straightforward. 31, according to the lecture, people often mistakenly think the boomerang returns to its thrower, didn't mention that, is the earliest example of heavier-than-air flight, was developed exclusively in Australia, is a simple tool, and was developed exclusively in Australia. He says something about, I bet you thought that it is native to Australia. So this is the mistake he's talking about. The answer there would be C. I guess I can write these as we go along. Okay, the lecturer compares the boomerang to airplane wings because they are both. Now, he talks for a good 20 seconds about the similarities between airplane wings and a boomerang. Made of wood and are bent in the middle. The bent part is true. He mentions that. He doesn't say anything about being made of wood, though. Heavier than air? No. He doesn't mention that. That could be true. Of similar proportions? Again, not really mentioned. Rounded on top and flat on bottom. That's the answer. That's what he states. They are both have a rounded top and they're flat on bottom. Returning boomerangs fly on an axis that is perpendicular to the thrower, the direction of the wind, its flat edge, its round edge. And the answer is the thrower, and that's the reason why the returning boomerang comes back to the person that launches it. Non-returning boomerangs are thought to have been heavier than returning boomerangs, used for sport. Not that, because we know he mentions that returning boomerangs were used for sport and fun. Made to return to their throwers? No, because it's a non-returning boomerang. Made before returning boomerangs. And letter A is not mentioned, so the answer is D, made before returning boomerangs. In the recording, he says that anthropologists believe that they had a purpose, which was hunting, and therefore they were likely made before the returning boomerang was made. The lecturer makes it clear that returning boomerangs operate the same as non-returning boomerangs. That's not true. He spends quite a few minutes talking about the directions that the two different purposes for the boomerangs were less functional than non-returning boomerangs. Yep, could be. Are indigenous to Australia? No, he clarifies that. Are slightly smaller than non-returning boomerangs? No, he mentions nothing about that. The answer is letter B. Non-returning boomerangs are more functional because they are used to hunt. Returning boomerangs were used for sport. Okay, let's go to the final section here. And I'll just give us a couple extra seconds to read because we didn't use the time before for the review and the read ahead to read this section. The boomerang is a fascinating tool that traces its origins back many... Start it now.
You have some time to look at questions 36 to 40.
Okay, so this is likely... well, these are one-word answers only, so this could be centuries, could be something for a period of time. Boomerangs were even found in the King Tutankhamun. This is going to be a noun. It has some relation to Tutankhamun. Many historians feel the boomerang continued in Australia several centuries longer than the rest of the world because of something in Australia caused the boomerang to be used longer. British...
Now listen carefully and answer questions 36
Listen for
to
an
40.
agent noun.
Boomerang use itself goes way back and has its roots in some surprising places. From 30,000 years ago in southern Poland, to the boomerangs found lining King Tutankhamun's tomb, to British documentation of boomerang use among Australia's Aborigines in the 1800s. The boomerang has a long history. So an obvious question is why the boomerang has become so uniquely associated with Australia when it has so much history in other places. Well, most anthropologists today agree that Australia's geographic isolation is a major cause. When British settlers started arriving in Australia, they found people using a tool that had not been used in other parts of the world for many centuries. Thus, the boomerang was, in a way, reborn, and its new home was seen as Australia. Now, let's return to the subject of hunting. Boomerangs are much more effective hunting tools in the open, arid landscapes than they are in foliage-dense environments. With large stretches of dry, flat desert, it is no wonder an effective tool like the boomerang spread across Australia. This widespread use of the tool is not matched anywhere else in the world, and it is thought that this is because it best matches Australian terrain. Okay, if there aren't any questions, I'd like to talk about how a boomerang is made.
That is...
Okay, that's the end of the listening. So, one-word answers traces its origins back many, and I believe he gives the example of thousands of years ago. So this would be many millennia. The single word that would mean thousands of years. Boomerangs were even found in the, okay, we probably could have guessed this answer actually without even listening, tomb of King Tutankhamun. Many historians feel boomerang use continued in Australia several centuries longer than the rest of the world because of Australia's, and I believe he even uses the word in the listening, isolation. So Australia is apart from the rest of the world, and this is why the rest of the world perhaps, or other parts of the world, stopped using the boomerang and Australia continued to use it. Now, this is the one question that I believe is stated a little bit earlier on, so you had to kind of be listening. British documented the use of boomerangs among the Aborigines. And this is not journalists, it's not explorers, it's settlers. And he uses that word as well. Australia's also encouraged the use of the tool to spread, and Australia's terrain also encouraged the use of the tool to spread. Okay, so add your marks up out of 40. Here is the band score calculator, so you can check to see how many marks out of 40 you got and what that would match, how that would match with your rough band score. So I hope that video helped train your ear a little. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, you should run through as many mock listenings as you can before you actually engage the exam. You can find more mock listening videos like this one at my blog, IELTS Listening Blog. Find all the mock listings right here or by clicking on practice tests. Thank you for watching and have a nice evening.